Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Version 1, a podcast where interesting people come to talk about their creative process, imposter syndrome, inspiration, failures along the way, and much more. I'm your host, Waverly, and you can follow the show on Instagram at Version 1 Podcast and subscribe to our Substack, version1podcast.substack.com. You can also find me on buymeacoffee.com/Waverly Colville if you want to support the show. You can listen to this episode wherever you get your podcasts or head over to YouTube to watch the video version. Remember to leave us a nice review and rate us 5 stars. All right, let's get into the episode. Everyone, I am here with my guest this week, Althea Wiles, a floral designer in Arkansas. Althea, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me today.
Of course. Could we just start with having you introduce yourself and a bit about the work that you do?
Sure. My name is Althea Wiles, and I have been a florist since 1994, so 28 years now, or more. Wait, 32 years now. I've had
32.
my business. Sorry about that. I've had my business for 28 years. I am an Arkansas Master Florist and own my own studio floral shop. I'm also a floral educator and do consulting and teaching in various formats.
That's awesome. That's so interesting. I have never had a florist on the show, so I'm so excited to talk about flowers and all the creativity that goes into that. Could we start with, when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I actually did not have something specific that I wanted to be when I was very young. In college, I looked at a few different things. I was a sociology major. I looked at therapy and different things like that. I also semi-considered being a funeral director.
Oh,
One thing I knew that I did not ever want to do was work in a nursery. My parents had a nursery, a plant nursery growing up, and I absolutely hate working with the plants and working with the dirt. I have a brown thumb, but I love working with flowers. So I didn't really have anything that from a young age I knew that this is what I was going to do, except for I always knew that I would be self-employed.
oh, gotcha. So you always kind of had that entrepreneurial, creative spirit to you, regardless of
Yes.
like kind of what path you wanted to go down. That's really
hmm
interesting that you grew up with parents who owned a nursery and then you ended up in florals, but you didn't want to go that direction. But
hmm
flowers is kind of, I guess, related but different. Like, can you
It
talk to me
it
kind of like about the
is.
path, the connection?
So, as a child, I raided my parents' gardens and their plants and created small arrangements for the house quite often. I did a lot of watercoloring and sketching. I didn't have a lot of formal training with that, but I did the creative things quite often. Um, when I got to college, I studied sociology, and then I had a spring break where I had nothing going on, and I volunteered at a flower shop. And the owner at that time, his father had just retired and sold him the business. So his father took me under his wing and started teaching me floral design. And that's where I really fell in love with it. But growing up with the plants, I just never really connected with that. My parents, my grandparents had nurseries, and it never was my thing. I never fell in love with the plants.
Oh, gotcha, gotcha. What was it about floral design that made you fall in love with it initially?
A couple of things. It's a wonderful creative outlet. You get to create something every single time you do it. It's different. Even if you're trying to replicate it, it's very different. That's actually one of the things I like best about it is that the flowers die. That is part of the process. As you design, you create something. It's different each time you look at it, and then eventually it's gone. It's dead, and you throw it away. You can do preserved and dry, but generally you throw it away, and I like that because it doesn't create clutter. It's not all these things that I've designed and I don't have anything to do with them anymore. They're gone. It's something new the next day.
Yeah, like sort of the temporary aspect of it is what
hmm
makes it special because you know it's not
Absolutely.
going to last forever. So you have to enjoy it while the moment is here because flowers don't last particularly
Uh,
long.
Correct. Compared to other artwork, they don't last very long.
Yeah.
But they also change as you design. A tulip opens up, it grows up to an inch each day, even after it's
Wow.
cut. And so you design with a tulip one day, and then the next day it's a completely different arrangement. So even as it grows and dies, it's changing and it's a different art form.
That's really cool. That's really cool that you can see sort of your artwork change in a relatively short period of time and see
Mhm.
how it evolves. That's really cool. Could you walk me through your process from the moment, a client books you to come up with a floral design to the day of the event? Like, what does that process look like?
So for me, I actually work best when I have parameters around the job. So some florists go into a room and they see a plan and they have a design in their head of what they want to create. I work best when I have parameters from the client, and that can be color or textures or an overall feeling. It can be the budget, it can be the season, but things that are important to the client really help me focus in on what I'm going to be designing. So I have a very extensive questionnaire that I go over. Either they fill out the questionnaire or we talk about it and I go through all the questions, get that information together, get inspiration photos from them, and then work from that to create a design that fits both what they're envisioning, their budget, things they like, and I try and avoid things that they don't like. So some people don't like carnations. We try and avoid carnations. And then I will meet with them, create a proposal, send that to them. Once they've booked with me, it pretty much just goes on hold until we're about a month out from the event. At that point, I'll create recipes, do a final check in with everybody, make sure nothing major has changed with the plans. And with weddings, that does happen quite often. We have a lot of changes. But at that point, I will create recipes, make my floral order. The flowers come in about a week before the wedding or the event. We start designing about 4 days before, and then we're completely finished with everything the day before, and then delivery and setup on the day of. So I have a
Wow.
very good overall list of checkpoints and things that we have to do at certain points, but most of the work happens in that last month and last week.
Gotcha. And when you're in the beginning stages of
Mhm.
figuring out what exactly a client wants in terms of like the different types of flowers or things like that, when you present them the ideas, like, do you have, I guess, like, is it a unique design every time, or sometimes do you have like standard recipes of flower combinations that you go back to, and like, how do you present them to the client? Because, like, for example, for me, like, I don't know a ton about flowers, so like, I
Mhm.
kind of would need to see like a photo of what you're talking about, because
Right.
like, if you tell me like a name of a flower, I might not know it beyond like the main like most popular ones, you
And
know?
that's actually very common here.
Okay.
In this country, our society, we don't prioritize flowers as an everyday thing. So most people don't know types of flowers unless they have a very special flower that's important to them. So that's why I ask for their inspiration photos. And that's where Pinterest and Instagram come in and are very
Mm,
helpful because the client can send me a few pictures and I can pick out pattern recognition. I will see colors, I will see styles, I will see textures, I'll see things that don't match, and that's usually what I'll ask about. So I had a client come in this week, and she had said she wanted wildflowers. Well, that can mean sunflowers and it can mean lilies. It can mean small flowers that have lots and lots of blooms on them. It can be a very soft texture. It can be very bright. It can be very just white and yellow. So there's a huge variation in wildflowers. So what she did was about she sent me a Pinterest board, but there were three or four that really sort of popped out to me. And within just looking at those, I could see she really loved sunflowers. She really loved lots of texture, lots of small individual, not just roses in a row, basically. So lots of different combinations. But she didn't necessarily love the really bright blues and reds and yellows. She liked more of a softer palette with the hot pinks and purples and blues in there with a little bit of the yellow sunflowers. And so within just a couple of photos, we were able to narrow it down. Now, when I'm planning,
gotcha.
I will have a list of flowers that I like to use, and on the back end, I'll have those. But for the client, I usually work with their inspiration to pull out what's important to them.
Gotcha. And you mentioned some of the factors that go into design, like color or like shape. What are some of the other factors that you consider when choosing which flowers to use?
So a lot of it does come from their inspiration photos, and then what I like to use. So there's some flowers I just really don't like working with, and so I avoid talking about those because if my client doesn't know a lot about flowers, I don't necessarily have to use those flowers that I don't like. I can work with the ones that I like, which makes it a lot easier and a lot more creative and a lot more fun for me on the back end. Um, I'm sorry, I lost the thread of your question.
Oh no, I was just curious, like, what are some of the factors that you consider when working with flowers? Like you mentioned, like color before, but I was
Mhm.
curious, does like scent play a factor, or shape, or other things? Like,
Absolutely.
yeah.
There's a list of principles and elements that go into floral design, and fragrance is one of those, shape, color, texture, but also you look at the scale and proportion of the room, the scale and proportion of the tables and the containers that you're using for the arrangements in an event. You look at if it's for a corporate event, you look at the colors of the brand and the feeling that they're trying to bring in for their corporate event, which is a little bit of a different process than the weddings. And then you look at the budget. So a carnation, a rose, and a peony are very similar in sizes, and the role that they play within an arrangement, but you have prices that go from very inexpensive up to one of the premium flowers. And so those can be interchanged because they all have come in the same colors, but they're different budget points. So we'll look at those things as well.
Gotcha, gotcha. On your website, it says your design philosophy is about enhancing nature's inherent beauty rather than forcing it into submission. I was
Mhm.
wondering what that means in practice.
So usually, what I tend to do is I will edit flowers. I will pull off bad petals, or I will show the better side of a flower. I will do things to enhance a beautiful flower where other things might be in the background, rather than doing things. There are techniques in floral design where, you can manipulate stems, weave leaves, you can deconstruct petals, and sunflowers, you can use just the center of the sunflower and take the petals off, and it's got a very textured, unique look. But for me, that's more of that end stage. I don't really like the way that looks in most arrangements. So I will try and, like when you put on makeup or when you do your hair, I will try and enhance that rather than manipulate it and force it into something that it's not. Now, that doesn't mean that I
Gotcha.
don't use some of the techniques to bend and get the flowers where they I need to go, but if it's not working, if it does not bend that way, I use something else or I'll do a different design.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Where are places that you find inspiration for new designs other than like a client's mood board? But when you're trying to come up with some new ideas, where do you find inspiration?
It, really, it does come from my clients. My best work comes
Oh,
from
gotcha.
when I know the person, especially when I've worked with somebody multiple times, so I know sort of what they like. Um, the feeling, the personality of the client that I'm working for is more inspirational to me than just looking at art in a museum or things like that. I really do love, natural landscaping. I grew up in the middle of the woods, and so things that aren't tailored, I don't really want a park where everything is very manicured. But being in nature and seeing the woods, or like we grew up with huckleberry bushes, seeing the huckleberry bushes, that will inspire me to design to be more natural rather than trying to force something into a topiary shape like you would see in a very formal garden.
I
Um,
gotcha.
Other than that, it almost always comes back to the client for me.
Gotcha, gotcha. Um, Something else that I saw on your website, which I thought was said very well and very beautifully, was you write, there's something deeply fulfilling about helping people express their emotions through the language of flowers. I was
Mhm.
curious what exactly the language of flowers is and like sort of what types of flowers evoke what emotions, if that makes sense.
So, the language of flowers is, something that was used in Victorian times where they would send messages through the arrangements, posies, how the flowers were gathered together, how they were tied, how they were presented, how they were worn. It's not something we really use a lot now, but we still do have some of that. For example, when I say red roses, people think of love and romance. So if somebody is sending an arrangement to, a friend, they don't necessarily want to send the red roses because we think of red roses as love and romance. Um, Culturally, there are things like lilies for funerals that we think about. Some of these have faded and changed over the years, and I've seen that through 30 years of doing this, where things that used to be very important aren't so important anymore, or they've become more important. But those are the types of things. So if somebody is sending something for a birthday and they say they want something fun, that usually means bright colors. If they say it's something for sympathy and they really don't know, they usually want something that's more muted or whites and white flowers and foliage is always appropriate for a funeral because it's soothing. So it's those types of things, making sure that the colors and the styles and the fragrances match the occasion and the sentiment that's being sent, or that we're building for an event, corporate or for weddings.
Awesome. And how do you think about balance when it comes to your designs?
So there are a couple of different types of balance. There's both visual and physical actual balance, and both of those are important. If you design something that looks like it's going to fall over, it creates a tension and it's not calming. So you want to avoid that unless you're absolutely trying to evoke that feeling of tension and instability. You can build something that is physically balanced and looks like it's going to not stand correctly, or you can build something that is physically off balance, and you really just want to avoid that because that's never good for any event.
Yeah.
But it's important. It's part of your principles and your elements of design. It's something you have to consider, along with all of the other ones, so that things feel right. They don't create a sense of tension unless you're intentionally trying to do that.
Gotcha. What are some of your favorite floral designs or recipes that you've done?
um I recently did an arrangement for a good friend of my parents' partner who passed away, and we did a Hogarth curve. It's on my Instagram right now, which is it's called the Line of Beauty, and so it's an S-shaped curve, and it's a difficult challenge technically, but creating something like that was meaningful. It was something that was important to she's basically an aunt. Um, and it was something that was technically challenging because it's something I don't do all the time. It's a little bit difficult to create if you don't get it exactly right. It just feels off. And so doing something like that is always feels good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm sorry for your loss, but that piece that you
Thank
made
you.
sounds like it was very beautiful and meaningful. So do you ever, whenever you have a project or something like that, do you ever experience sort of like a rut or like something where you're like, I don't know what to do, or like I don't know which direction to take this or anything
Mhm.
like that?
Absolutely. And that's where recipes come in. Because after you don't have to create something brand new every single design. You can do the same recipe, and because flowers never repeat, they're always unique. Every design will be a little bit different. And so having a recipe for when you're just not feeling creative, especially running a business that where you have to produce, you don't get to produce on your own schedule. I either have orders we're trying to deliver that day, or a wedding that you just can't be late for a wedding. It's a hard deadline.
Yeah.
Um, so having those recipes in the background mean that I've already designed this. I know what it's going to look like overall, but it's got some unique touches for that wedding or that event or that gift that day. And so I don't have to be creative, but I can still produce something beautiful.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's kind of going back to the basics that you know, but then being
Mhm.
like, okay, well, like what spin can I put on it for this
Right.
particular event that I didn't put on like
Mhm.
for the previous one or something like that. That's great that you have like
Mhm.
kind of go tos where you can go back to. What do you have a favorite flower?
I don't have a favorite. I have ones I don't like, and then every once in a while, I will find the perfect flower, like a perfect ranunculus or a perfect rose. And roses aren't my favorite. We use them so often; they're just ordinary. But every once in a while, you get that rose that is just absolutely quintessentially a rose, and it's gorgeous.
Mm.
And that those I really love. Um, Favorite in general, not really. I just have something I really don't like.
Gotcha.
Ones I really don't like. I really don't like Masamoto asters. Sunflowers, it's a mood thing. Sometimes I like them, sometimes I don't, but they're not really a favorite. Um, those are probably the two that I avoid the most.
Gotcha. And does the time of year of someone's event affect which flowers are chosen, or can you order flowers even if they're not in season locally? Like you can order them and bring them in any time of year?
Yes and no. You can, most flowers get any time of year because we have a worldwide market. Prices will go up, prices will be different. There are a few flowers that there are times where it's really not even worth trying to get, like peonies. If you try and get them off season, they will be small. They won't be that big, beautiful bloom that most people imagine when they think of a peony. But you can still get them most of the time, most of the year.
Oh.
Locally grown flowers, we have a market that's basically late March through late October, early November. And that is a lot more weather dependent. So how our seasons are here locally and what the farmers are growing locally will depend on what we can get. For weddings, we generally order in and we bring things in either from California, from South America, from the Netherlands, so we can get pretty much anything. And that's usually important because we're trying to match certain colors or certain types of flowers. If a client wants locally grown, then it's a lot more last minute what's available, and it can affect, you can't be as particular about your color scheme or the specific flowers.
Gotcha. Okay, that answered my next question because I was going to ask
Mhm.
where you order flowers from, but it sounds like from all over the world.
All over the world, but during the local season, I do try and use locally grown flowers as much as possible, both to support the farmers. With my parents being in the wholesale business, I know how difficult that can be to grow and raise and farm. But also the quality, the freshness is so much better if you get local flowers. It's a lower carbon footprint. For being something that you would think is a green industry, the floral industry really is not. We have a huge
Mm.
floral carbon footprint because of all the shipping mostly, and because of the single-use plastic in the wrapping of, bunches that when we get them in, everything is wrapped in cellophane. And so buying local, you avoid a lot of that. And they're just fresher and they're prettier and you get different things. And so I really love using the local flowers.
Yeah. Because flowers are so delicate, sorry, this might be like a silly question, but like how are they shipped from like South America and Europe and like survive that journey?
So there are different techniques. One is called dry packing, and the flowers are intentionally, they aren't provided with water, and it's been studied and they know how long they can last. Valentine's Day flowers are currently being harvested right now. We're 5 weeks out. And then the cold chain is the other thing. So keeping the flowers at the correct cold temperature, just above freezing,
Mm.
from the time they are cut and harvested until they reach my shop and I process them, recut, give them the correct chemicals to have them take up water best, and then store them in my cooler. And so you can actually harvest quite a few flowers much earlier than you would expect, and the end consumer will still have a vase life of 3 to 8 days, depending on the type of flower.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, because in my head, I'm like, wait, flowers are so delicate. Like, I feel like
Mhm.
that would be a really hard thing to do to ship them across the sea, right? But
Lots
it
of
sounds like,
studies have
yeah.
been done, and they know exactly how long they will last. But we will get flowers in, and when they come in, they're very limp and they don't look good at all. And then we do have a process. We have chemicals that are used to increase water uptake and to preserve them once they've taken up that water. So it's a whole process. There's a whole science behind it. Lots of studies been done. Um, but the temperature is really the big thing. You don't want your flowers to freeze, but you do want that temperature just above freezing in your cooler.
Gotcha, gotcha. How does your approach change when you're designing for a wedding versus a corporate event or another type of event?
So weddings are high emotions. Weddings and funerals have so many emotions tied to them. I really try and be cognizant of the tensions and the emotions that my clients are feeling then. There's a lot of stress involved in those life moments. And so it's a lot more emotion oriented, where with the corporate work, it is We have a vision, we have a color, we have a budget. Here are the three options. Pick one. Everything's decided. Decisions don't change all that often. So it's a lot. The checkbacks and the changes don't happen as much with the corporate work. Also, once I've worked with a corporation or a company one time or a couple of times, I have an idea of what they're wanting. And so it's very easy for them to just say, hey, we've got this event. We did it last year. We need the same thing, this many tables. And they don't have to do as much work. But with
Gotcha.
the events like sympathy or weddings, it's usually somebody that's never worked with flowers before. They, like you said, they don't know the flowers except for one or two main flowers. And it's something that's really important to them. And so there's a lot of
Mhm.
stress there. And so we work through that stress. We try and make sure that all their questions are answered. I don't worry if people make changes. If somebody says, "Oh, I found this, I really like this better, let's do that." That's absolutely fine.
Wow, it sounds like there's a lot of your job requires a lot of like emotional intelligence and managing
It
people's
does. Yes.
emotions because as someone who has helped plan both a wedding and a funeral, like sometimes some people have like a calm energy in those stressful situations, some people
Mhm.
have not a calm energy, and it can
Right.
be really stressful, and probably, I can imagine you've seen a lot of different things over the years. So
A lot of
I guess
tears on both.
yeah, absolutely. How, I mean, because it takes such sort of like because you obviously have the very like technical knowledge of knowing
Mhm.
so much about flowers, being able to recommend and design and have that technical knowledge, but it also requires the skills of like emotional intelligence and people skills that I guess, how do you like balance that, and how did you kind of learn to balance those two sort of like skill sets that are needed?
First of all, I don't book back-to-back consultations because it's emotionally draining for me to deal with the emotions, to be on the receiving end of those. So I make sure that at the most, I will only have two consultations in one day for a wedding or sympathy. Um, that helps a lot once I realized that I just could not stack those appointments one after another. Um, I think I've always just been somebody that in tense situations, I become the calm. And so I don't make that emotional level rise any, and I actually tend to bring it down just because I do tend to be calm. I cut through the emotions a lot with my questions. And being the expert means that um, my clients tend to trust me because I can answer that. And I've always made it a point that when it's something I don't know, I let them know that I'm not sure. I'll need to research that. So they never feel like I am going to just tell them something that's not true or that they can't trust what I'm saying. And that's always been my approach, and it's worked well. So I don't end up with the quote bridezillas. I don't really like that term because really what's going on is they're just stressed out. It's hard to do this, and so I tend to bring in the calm, and they connect with that.
I love that. What are some things that you do for self care to kind of like, take a step back and reset?
I bring my dogs to work. So I have
Oh, I
two
love
dogs and they get to
that.
come to work with me. One of them loves to sit at the table for consultations with us. So he's my little salesman. But
Aw.
that definitely helps. Just having them there. It's animals are great. They help regulate our emotions. But on my own time, I read. I love science fiction and fantasy. And I made it a point years ago to just cut off the time. So after my working hours, and sometimes that's 3 o'clock, sometimes that's 6 o'clock. But after the workday is done, I don't pick up my work phone anymore. I don't answer texts late at night. I don't answer emails, or if I do, I will send it, delayed send. Um, Same for the weekends. If we aren't working, I make sure that I just stay away from work. I actually used to have my studio in my home, and I realized that I never got to turn off. I never got to take that break, and so I moved out of the house for that very reason. Um, but mostly reading. That's probably my favorite thing to do to decompress. I've recently gone back to some watercoloring. So I'm just now starting to explore that again. We'll see.
Oh, I love that. That's awesome. I love to read too. And you probably have heard my dogs in the background of this episode or most of my episodes because they're always barking. So I love
Yes.
dogs as well.
Today I had one that went to daycare because she barks, and the other one is here. He's on the couch asleep.
Oh, yeah. I right now, I my boyfriend and I have two dogs, and right now I'm at my mom's house. She also has two dogs, so I'm in a four dog household right now. So
Oh,
it's a lot of fun, but a lot of noise all the
yes.
time. As someone who has been in the industry for over 30 years now, I can imagine you've seen a lot, you've done a lot. You're an expert in your field. I'm curious, what are some of the big like changes or evolutions that you've seen in the last 30 years?
In styles or
Yeah, I
just in
think
general in the industry?
yeah, let's start off with like general in the industry, but then also I'd love to talk personally about like your evolution and stuff like that. But yeah, let's start with like some of the biggest changes you've seen over the last 30 years in general in the floral industry.
So, one of the big ones is when I started the cascading wedding bouquet, and I started focusing on weddings mostly in my early career. But the cascading wedding bouquet, especially the Princess Diana style bouquet, was very, very popular. Shortly after that, Martha Stewart started her magazine and completely changed the way we did wedding bouquets. So we went from long cascading bouquets with lots of technical details to basically round, tight balls of flowers. That's loosened up quite a bit, which is really nice. And then after that, we moved to sort of the opposite, which was very loose, organic greenery, lots of texture in it. Recently, in the last few years, we've moved to organic but flower focus. So very little greenery in a lot of the designs, more texture, where the individual flower is very important. So something that stands out, like the ranunculus, the peonies, things like that, but very little foliage, and rather than all foliage. But that change from the Princess Diana bouquet to the Martha Stewart bouquet was probably the biggest dramatic shift that I've seen in the 30 years. And that happened pretty early in my career.
Oh, interesting. And then how has your personal approach or your style or anything personally with you changed over the last 30 years?
I think I've become more confident, more comfortable in designing things that I like, and just instead of saying I can absolutely do something, or I'll still try new things, but I've learned that if it doesn't really truly resonate, it's okay to say no. And this is not a wedding or an event that I want to do. For example, a few years ago, pampas grass was incredibly popular. Every single wedding had pampas grass in it. I hate that stuff. It's awful for the environment. It's hard to work with. I just, every time I tried, I never connected with it. And I ended up really struggling with each and every one of those events. There's your dog.
Yep.
Um, so I learned to say, the pampas grass is not my thing. I'm not going to do it, and so I don't take weddings with that anymore. So and I'm not uncomfortable with that. I will refer to other florists in the area that do use it, and or it's more in their style. Um, in general, I think I've become comfortable with. I like a lush, full design. I don't like a design that's very minimalistic, and so I tend to gravitate towards that. I guess overall, just becoming more comfortable with saying no to what other people want if it doesn't really resonate for me.
Yeah, I love that. Because you've been in the industry for 30 years, what would your predictions be for like what's coming next in the floral industry?
Um, the big box stores like Costco, Walmart, Whole Foods have affected the industry as well. Because they have such a huge buying power, they can actually contract full farms, floral farms, which affects the pricing for the professional florists like me. I think that's going to continue. I think people want flowers and want the beauty and enjoy having flowers around. And so having access to those smaller, maybe not designs, but just the flowers themselves, it's going to continue. That's not going to go away. But I do think also that with the way AI is becoming more prevalent and things like that, things that are creative are going to be more important as well. So something that's handcrafted, handmade, designed with purpose is still going to be important. But instead of being just a broad, you can be a florist, you don't have to have a lot of training. I think you are going to have that training again, have the technical know how, the knowledge to make the flowers look and the way you want them to and last as long as you can is going to become important. So there'll be more of a break of more of the DIY, more of the people that want just flowers in their house and it doesn't have to be arranged, and then the true artist that is designing something that is very technical, that not everybody can do. And we've seen that sort of
Yeah.
split and move away. So we have these sort of two different areas, and I think that's going to continue.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I totally think that like with the rise of AI, sort of more like manual hobby like or not
Mm-hmm.
hobby manual like activities or things are going to rise because the value because AI can't do that, at least not right now. We don't have
Right.
robots that can like make the floral designs, or like I feel like I on social media have seen an uptick in like people learning how to crochet or people learning how to
Mm-hmm.
sew again, or like sort of these like more traditional things that you can't do on a computer rise up because the value is becoming higher, which I think is a great thing, in these sort of like more traditional like activities.
It really is, but it's also difficult on the business side because you
Mm.
can't just be a florist. It used to be you had a florist shop and you went to that flower shop in your city for everything from dances and proms and date nights and everything. And now you can get that at Walmart or Costco. So
Mm.
you it's hard on the business side for that. But as an artist, I think that it's not a bad thing.
Gotcha. Yeah. So it's kind of this like competing sort of like,
Yes.
it's like good
Mhm.
and bad.
Yeah.
Gotcha. What are some of the ways that you want your business to change or evolve over the next 30 years?
It's a long time. I think I'm leaning into the teaching and the consulting. That first person that took me under their wing and taught me what he knew, he'd been a florist for 30 years at that point. And being 19, 18 at that time, I was like, wow, that's a long time. But he gave me so much knowledge and he mentored me. He taught me so many things about the way he had learned how to do things, things that I still use today. Being able to give that back, teach and mentor other florists that are coming into the industry, even if they're in for 5 years or if they stay for 30 years, because it's a very physically demanding job. It's not just playing with flowers, it's cleaning the buckets and processing the flowers and carrying the heavy arrangements. But teaching people the back end of it, teaching some of the business stuff really speaks to me right now. As far as design, it something's going to come up. Some new trend is going to come up. I'll be interested in it. I'll want to learn it. I may keep it, I may not. But it's an ever evolving, just like the individual flowers and arrangements evolve, the design styles evolve too. And it's fun to learn the new ones. I may not keep them. I may not use them all the time, but it is fun to learn them.
Absolutely. What would you say flowers add to an event? Like what is the role that flowers play in an event, would
Warmth
you
and
say?
life. If you've ever been to a funeral service where there are no flowers, it's very cold. It's not embracing at all. But the same for a gala, a fundraising event. If you've been to one where they did not put decorations on the table or they put something very minimal compared to one where they do a centerpiece or have flowers at the entry, it brings a warmth and a life and brings nature inside.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say flowers have taught you?
You're never, ever, ever going to be perfect. Every single flower you work with is a little different, and you can't expect that perfection.
I love that. That's fantastic. Um, what would you say to somebody who came to you and is considering working with you or hiring you? Like in other words, like what makes your business, your design approach unique? Why should someone work with you as a florist over somebody else?
I can't say that somebody should definitely work with me unless our personalities match. If if we don't connect when we're doing that initial consultation, I recommend that they find somebody else because it is such a high stress, high emotion time for funerals, for weddings, even if you're just giving gifts. If we don't resonate, it's not going to be right. And so that I have sent people to other florists in the area if I feel like they're a better match. I tell my people when I first meet with them that you really have to have vendors that you connect with, and flowers especially, because most people don't know flowers. They don't know designs and styles and things like that. It is important that they connect with me so that they can trust what I'm saying and that what I design fits with them as well.
Yeah, so it's very personal, it sounds
Mm.
like. That's awesome.
It absolutely is, yes.
What are your favorite parts about being a florist and a floral designer?
Which is different from my favorite parts and least favorite parts of being a business owner. Designing itself is the one of those places where my mind gets quiet, where I can go into that flow state, where I can lose time just creating. And so that is very, very wonderful. It's critical. But then the business side of it, that pressure can actually disrupt that. So you end up feeling crunched for time. You have to get something out or done by a certain amount of time. And so you lose that flow state if you're not careful. I'm pretty good at planning and organizing so that we have enough time that so whoever is designing in the studio has that chance to get into that flow state. You create better when you're in that state. But it just quiets your mind.
Yeah, I love that. My next question was going to be what your least favorite part is, but it kind of sounds like the pressure is. Or do you have another
Um,
least or most challenging part?
as a business owner or as a designer, because those really are two very different things.
Both. Both.
Uh, as a designer, I would say it's when I end up working with flowers that I don't like the pampas grass, or if I'm really not in the mood for a sunflower, having to work with sunflowers. I get around that a lot because I'm the owner and I get to figure out what to order or say yes or no to an event. So it doesn't come up all that often. As a business owner, just the pressure of always having to make sure things happen on time. You don't get a break. Even if you're at home alone, you don't get a break. If especially for a small business, if you are the business owner, everything comes to you. And so you can't just say, I'm off work and I'm done and I'm not going to think about it anymore because it's still there and it'll be there when you come back.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like there's a lot of pressure, and also like your events that you're doing are one time only sort of events most of the time. And so,
Hard
and flowers
deadlines.
are so yeah, and flowers are, temporary. They're not like made of plastic. You can't like save them for later. It is a one. So it sounds like there's a lot
Yes,
of time pressure on you.
there is a lot of time pressure, and actually, floral design studios and shops have a lot in common with restaurants because you're working with a perishable product, you're working with deadlines and timing like that. As far as the stresses and the business side of a flower shop, quite a bit of it is very similar to a restaurant.
Oh, interesting. I've never
If you
made
don't
that
sell it, you have to
comparison.
throw it away.
Yeah, totally. That's interesting. I've never heard that comparison, but what you're saying, it makes so much sense. Have
Mhm.
you ever experienced a mistake or a setback or a challenge that ended up teaching you a really important lesson that you carry with you to this day?
Yes. So always get verification. Everything for an event, dates, times, places, all of it. Get verification in writing beforehand. Double check everything. Always double check everything when you're loading and when you're unloading. Uh, I- my contract is 6 pages long because of things that have happened over the years of
Oh, wow.
a client that gave me the wrong date on the wedding and did not update me when it changed, and so that was a big one. That's where I now send a form that they have to sign off on with a confirmation of date, time, and place. I've had people change addresses and not update me because the planning process for a wedding can be several months up to a year and a half long, and
Yeah.
it's hard to remember all the vendors that you have to talk to and tell. So I make sure that I request that they sign off on it now. Um, I think I've always hated the advice that you have to be willing to fail as a business owner to succeed. I've never looked at those types of things as failures. I think that you're always testing things, you're always trying things, and some things work better than others. Some things will work for a certain amount of time and then it's no longer relevant or it doesn't work anymore. Having been in business for 30 years, there are definitely those things that have happened. So being willing to try but not be attached to those things is very important. It causes a lot more stress if you really hold on to those. Willing to fail is always that one, but I don't like that word. I don't. It's more testing. You're trying things.
Yeah.
You're learning new things. The internet in 2000 is much different than the internet in 2026. And so, what I learned then when we were just starting with websites and e commerce and what we do now are not the same at all. And if I had tried to stay with what I did with my first website, I wouldn't have a business. It wouldn't work. So, you have to do that type of testing all the time. The other thing is, nobody thinks about what you're doing as much as you do. And so, you can't be afraid to do things like change your prices, change your design, update something. Nobody's going to remember what you did a year ago. If you had a one price and it's different this year, that's fine. You're like, you can do that. You get to set the prices. They're not going to remember what it was last year. It's fine. But that goes for designs as well. You might have designed something last year and you like the design, but you can continue to update it and change it a little bit, and that's okay. And one of the things that I tell my students all the time is that nobody knows the design you have in your head as well as you do. And so you can design something that's beautiful and everybody around you likes it, and you cannot hold on to the feeling in your head that it's not perfect because nobody else knows what that feeling was, what that image was that you started with. It's still beautiful. And so learning to let go of those types of things have that's an ongoing challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a really important lesson in no one knows what's in your head. You know what I mean? So if you're comparing yourself to this perfect vision in your head and it doesn't turn out exactly like that, it's okay. Like I feel like there's a really big life lesson in there for people of all creative disciplines, because I know that that's something that I experience sometimes, and people in probably every sort of field probably has experienced. So
It's
I love that lesson.
really, really hard to continue to remember that one.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever experience feelings of self doubt or imposter syndrome?
Mhm. For me, it tends to hit after I've done the final event. I've loaded everything back in the van. I'm ready to head home. And then it starts to hit me that did I do something they liked? Did I create what they were wanting me to create? Did I do enough? Did I do everything I could? And I've really worked on both in therapy and with my employees, telling them so that I will remember this as well, that trust my math. I've done the recipes, I've done the formulas, I've done the calculations to make sure that everything is right. Trust that I have double checked everything about 15 times, including with the client. Uh, and that again, it doesn't have to be perfect exactly like I had it in my head originally if the client's happy with it, and so to let it go at that point. But I used to come home and would stay up all night worrying that I hadn't done enough or hadn't done it correctly, and it was never true.
Yeah, and you've been doing this for over 30 years. You're an expert in your field. If you were bad at what you did, I don't think your business would have survived 30 years. So
Right.
I know you're excellent at what you do.
And that actually does help. The 30 years there, I can look back and say, okay, they were still liking this when I was doing this at 5 years. At 30 years, I think I'm okay. I think I can say I know what I'm doing on that part.
Yeah, absolutely. As someone who has been there doing what you're doing for 30 years, you have like a proven track record. You probably have hundreds, maybe thousands of events and projects that you've done. But in the beginning stages, when maybe you didn't have, the track record that you do now, and you didn't have all these events under your belt, how did you get past those feelings of imposter syndrome of like, oh my gosh, like what am I doing? When you were kind of more in those earlier stages.
Therapy.
I love that. I love therapy.
I really, therapy. talking about it with my therapist, talking about it with friends, and having them remind me all these things that I'm saying now. But therapy is really the big answer on that one because it's really difficult to overcome that on your own.
I love that. I love therapy. Huge fan of it. Been in it. Love
Since
it.
I was in my 20s, yes.
What is your definition of success?
It's difficult because I tend to work off a checklist. And so once something is done, I've checked it off, it's not on the list, and it almost doesn't exist for me anymore. So it's very difficult for me to remember these things that I have done that are successful. But having employees that like working for me, having clients that are happy with my work, being able to set my own schedule, bring my dogs to work, things like that. I have to remind myself when I get asked this type of question that those are successes. And so it's not really something that's in the future, but looking back and reminding myself of these things that have happened and that I've done. But most of the time, once they're off the list, they don't exist anymore for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, it sounds like you really love being able to kind of like shape and design your own life. Like you're allowed to bring your dogs to work. You're allowed to have people under you that enjoy working with you. And that's an answer I get a lot on this show is like having sort of like those little things that add up because there's so many people right now like and loving what you do, you know? There's so many people and I've been one of those people that's been stuck in like a corporate job that she hated and it was like and it was eating up all her time and I didn't have the time to do what I loved or anything like that. But it sounds like you really do what you love. You love the people you work with. You love being able to bring your dogs to work, which is a dream of mine. I wish I could work somewhere where I could bring my dogs to work other than working from home. But yeah, so that's awesome. That's really beautiful. And I love that you have that life for yourself. That's amazing.
It really is what I wanted. That part of it is what I wanted when I was 20 and saying that I want to be self-employed. It was those types of things, being able to set the schedule, to be the boss, even though there's so much other pressure. And I knew that there would be because I watched my parents be self-employed. So I knew a lot of those back end stresses already. And still, the fact that I can set the time that we're open or decide that I'm going to have the studio at the house or in a brick and mortar or a freestanding studio, having those types of options make it worthwhile to have this other stress that is sometimes overwhelming.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also the freedom and the ability to say no to events that you don't want to do because you don't want to work with certain flowers or maybe it isn't just like the right vibe
Mm-hmm.
match for you, I think is really great because like I'm self-employed as well. I'm a freelancer and you know, sometimes it's hard to say no to projects because you are self-employed. You don't have a steady
Yes.
paycheck coming in every 2 weeks. So sometimes you need that money. And I've said yes to some kind of shitty projects, if I'm being honest, over the last couple of
And
years
you
of being a
you have
freelancer. So yeah,
well,
it's awesome that you're
yes.
able to say no.
Yes, and I did that for a couple of different ways. One was going through that and taking on those projects because the bills had to be paid, and realizing how just soul sucking awful it was to have to do those types of projects. Um,
I love what you're saying because, you know, it's something that even though we're in completely different industries, there's like it's awesome. I admire your ability to say no and that you've built yourself to a place where you can really prioritize exactly what you want to do because I'm relatively like new in my self-employed journey. And so I can't always say no, but like sometimes I'm like, "Oh, I know this job is going to suck, but whatever, I need the money." So I hope one day to be where you're at is what I'm saying. Like I admire that you've built
it
yourself up to this
yes,
ability because I think it's very
it
honorable and courageous in a lot of ways.
thank you. It took a very long time to be comfortable saying no. I would say that has only happened in the last 5 to 8 years where I felt really comfortable saying no, even when the income may be needed or when it financially made sense or logically made sense. My gut was saying absolutely not and being comfortable with that. But the other thing is I have sort of separated in my head. There are some jobs that are just bill paying jobs, and they're not creative, they're not necessarily fun and exciting, they're not the soul sucking ones, but they're just there. And those are the bill payers. Those are the ones that you take on because they do those other business things. And then you have the fun creative projects that you get to do that are what keep you going and why, why you're still in the industry and still doing the things. Um, but you do have to go through that process. You have to experience some of those that are just awful. You have to get comfortable saying no, and trusting that the business that you're building will provide the other options as well. And then sometimes you just have to take on the jobs that just pay the bills.
I hear
So,
ya. I hear ya. That's the story of my life. All right, Althea, this has been wonderful. Are you ready to move into the lightning round?
sure.
Let's do it. All right, what is something new that you've tried lately?
New old. I started watercoloring again. It's something I haven't done since I was 12, 15 years old. And so I picked that up. I got some watercolors for Christmas and
I
I'm
love
starting to do
that.
watercolor again.
That's amazing. Are you painting flowers or other things?
Yes. Almost all floral and botanical.
Oh my gosh, I love that. That's wonderful. I'm so glad that you are rediscovering something that you loved when you were younger and it's coming
It's
back
been a
into
lot
your
of fun.
life.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have a lesson or a message that you want to share with listeners?
Uh, Being a creative entrepreneur is satisfying, but it's also incredibly difficult because you are bringing part of yourself, part of your soul out for and putting a dollar sign on it. And so you have to be consciously aware that this is going on. Therapy, go to therapy, deal with these issues because they will arise. Your relationship with money, your relationship with art, your relationship with customers, they converge when you're a small business in a creative industry. So paying attention to both of those is incredibly important.
Awesome. And what is one thing you wish you knew when you were first starting out?
That you don't really have to wear all the hats. Even if you feel like you can't afford everything, there are ways around it, and you don't have to wear all the hats because that is exhausting. It will overwhelm you, it will burn you out. And as soon as possible, and as soon as you figure out something else to do, let somebody else wear that other hat because you don't need all that.
I love that. All right, Althea, this has been wonderful. Where can everybody find you, check out your work, hire you for their next event? Tell us all the things.
So probably our website is the best. It's roseofsharonar.com. And then we're on Instagram as Rose of Sharon Floral. But all the things are on the website. So check us out there first. You get lots of information there. You can connect to Instagram, to email, and our phone numbers on there as well. So just give us a call.
Amazing. And do you do events just in Arkansas or do you travel and do events other places?
Mostly in Arkansas, but I will travel. So it really depends on what's needed. The first that I've gone so far is Dallas.
Ooh,
But really, as long as you have the planning and the organization, you can travel, and I will.
awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Althea. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining.
you. Thanks for having me.